Hello and welcome to 9411 Notes. In today's lesson, you'll be able to describe the central tendency of a data set and then create a box and whisker plot. And here's a bunch of vocab that we'll learn about. Mean, median, and mode, range, maybe outlier should all seem familiar to you from middle school. Quartile could be familiar, might be a new word. Interquartile range, abbreviated as IQR, we'll learn what that is. Box and whisker plot, and then we'll talk about the 5-number summary. So a measure of central tendency just describes how data clusters around a value. And there are 3 measures of central tendency that we're going to use. The first of those is the mean. Now, mean is kind of the same thing as the average. So that's when you take the sum of the values, or you add all them up in the data set, and just divide it by the number of values that you added together. Okay, so take your total, divide it by how many you added together, like finding the average. The median is just the middle value when you line all the values up in numerical order, so from least to greatest, and then you start crossing off so that you can find what is the number in the very middle. Or if you happen to have an even number of values, it's just the mean of the 2 middle values. And finally, the mode is just the value in your data set that occurs the most often. So there might be one number that's your mode, or you could have multiple modes. Sometimes you won't have a number occur more than once, and so there will be no mode. Okay, so if it just repeats itself, the most, that would be the mode. Okay, your range of a data set is just the difference between the greatest number and the smallest number. Okay, so we're just going to subtract largest versus smallest. This just describes the spread of the data, or how far spread out all of the values are. So we can find the mean, median, and mode, and the range doing a little bit of calculation here. So for the mean, I first need to find the total. So we're talking about the number of hours students spent on a research project. And there's kind of a spread. One student spent 2 hours, one student spent 10 hours. So there's a little bit of a difference. So we're going to find the mean between these 5 numbers. So the first thing we need to do is add them up to find our total number of hours. And then we're going to divide by the number of data points that we're adding together. And in this case, there were 5. Okay, so let's see, 2 and 4 plus 10 is 16, plus 7 is 23, plus 5 is 28. So let's use a calculator really quick to find out what is 28 divided by 5, and that is 5.6. So 5.6 hours is your mean. Median, we said, was found by taking all of the values and lining them up from smallest to largest. Okay, and then I'm just going to start maybe from the left and cross off one from the left, cross off one from the right, from the left, from the right. And I find that the value in the very middle is 5. So 5 is your median of this data set. The mode is just the value that occurs the most often. Well, I don't see any repeats of values. None of them occur more than once. So we're going to have to say there is no mode for this data set. It does ask us to find the range, and again, range is found by taking the largest minus the smallest, and your range here is 8 hours, a range of 8 hours. Okay, so my 3 measures of central tendency, mean, median, and mode, and then I found my range. We're going to do the same thing here this time. Now we're talking about the weight in pounds of 6 members of a basketball team. The difference with this example is, notice I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 values in this data set. There's an even number, so we'll see how that plays out with the median here in a second. So mean, of course, I'm going to take all of my values and add them up. 56, 150, So 163. And like I said, there are 6 of them. So I'm going to divide my total by 6. And if I very quickly add these values together, okay, I get 936. And I'm going to divide that by 6. I get a mean of about, well, it's exactly 156 pounds. Okay, I would say rounding to the nearest tenth would be appropriate. In this case, it's exactly 156. Okay, median is found by lining them up in numerical order. So my smallest value being 150. 150. I'm just going to cross these off so I can make sure I took care of them. And it's 156. 156. My next value would be 161. Final one is 163. And I can just cross these off from left to right to find my middle value. But I come down to 2 middle values. And in the last slide, it just said find your mean between those 2 middle values. So I'm just going to add those values together and divide by the number I'm adding together. 156 plus 156 is 312. Divide that by 2. Oh, look, it's 156, which you probably could have guessed, okay, median being 156, because you would know that the average between 2 of the same numbers would be that number. Okay, let's find the mode. So I have to see, do any of my values occur more than once? Yes, 150 occurs more than once. 156 also occurs more than once, and they both occur twice. Okay? If one of them were to have occurred 5 or 6 times, we would say that would be our mode. But since they each occur twice, we have 2 modes. 156 and 150 are my modes. And finally, the range. Range is the largest, which we said was 163, minus the smallest, which was 150. So your range is just 13 pounds. Okay? Okay. Please watch the video about finding the mean and median using your calculator. So you can just type in the data set and your calculator will find you your mean and median. And that's actually what I'm going to do on this slide. So question A, we've got Rico scored 74, 73, 80, 75, 67, and 55 on 6 history tests. We want to use the mean, median, and mode of his scores to answer these questions. So in A, which value gives Rico's test average? Well, I talked about average being the mean. Okay, to find your test average, you would add up all your scores and divide by how many there are. Well, that is the mean. I want to know which value best describes his scores. So instead of calculating this all by hand, I'm going to enter all of these values in my calculator, and I'm going to calculate the mean to be, my calculator at least tells me it's about 70.7. And my calculator also tells me that the median is 73.5. And it says which value best describes Rico's score. By the way, there is no mode. None of the values repeat themselves, so there is no mode. Well, just looking at the mean and median, I see that most of his scores are above 70. Right, we just have 67, which is pretty close to 70, but then we've got this 55 way down here. But a majority of them are, 73 and above. And our mean is 70.7. And if somebody said to me, how do you typically score, or to Rico, how do you typically score on a test? And he said, about a 70.7. That doesn't seem representative of his typical scores. They're typically higher than that. They're typically around this 73.5 score. So I would say the median would be a better measure of his test scores. And the reason why his mean is much lower is because of this 55 out here really weighing, pulling that mean down. So it's not really the best representation of his test scores. Okay, and that is all I have for you in part 1.